fool to butt in, Spider-Man. Now, I'll finish where the original Vulture left off. Welcome back and welcome to Season 2, Episode 23 of Me and My Friend Pete. Another Donuts and Dimes production. The podcast where we explore all things the Amazing Spider-Man comic book series. I'm your host, Peter Parker's persnickety pal, Gerald. Question. You ever heard Proverbs chapter 11, verse 2? When pride cometh, then cometh shame, but with the lowly is wisdom. No? Well, you're about to see it in action. We've got a jailbreak, we've got a snowstorm, Pete's got a cold, the Hudson River's got some FaceTime, and we've got a brand new villain in some old school garb. The first appearance of Blackie Drago. No relation. To who? Shut it, you! The Vulture 2.0. We're high above it all in this one, and before we dive bomb into it, we've got me. We've got you. We've got, no further ado, we've got the Amazing Spider-Man, the wings of the Vulture. If nothing else, Spidey's about to get wise. Let's swing!
Me and my best friend Pete, old adventures, new critiques. He spins webs, I spin yarns, kinda kooky, be forewarned. Look out, it's me and my friend Pete.
Other titles this month.
Spidey pops up in Daredevil Volume 1, number 27.
Mike Murdock must die.
Around this time to help the Hornhead take on the Stiltman. Written by Stan the Man Lee, penciled by also legend gentleman Gene Colan, with inking done by fearless Frankie Giacoya, and lettered by Artie, still in the name, Simek. For the record, Stiltman is not a villain who instills fear these days, but back in the Silver Age, I imagine he was a much bigger deal. I mean, this issue was his second back-to-back appearance in a DD issue, including the Masked Marauder. You may remember Masked Marauder as the guy who was running heists on par with the big mans over in ASM. Daredevil managed to shoot the man's blimp down, but the guy evaded capture and has been back to spoiling DD's plans once again because he's the reason the Stiltman got away last issue. The story opens with DD parkouring around the city looking for the Stiltman to bring him to justice before being diverted from his search when he sees Spidey in a 3-on-1 on the street below with 3 Berber gang members wielding blackjacks who were trying to steal a car. 3-on-1 is old hat for Spidey, who is making quick work of the villains, but DD is a hero, so he's going to put himself between the people and the danger, even if the people are spider-bitten goats. That's just how it goes. The two get to work letting the bodies hit the floor, and DD asks the King of Swing if he's seen the Stiltman anywhere around. Spidey, as he often does in his early days of superheroing, gets aggravated, going straight into his Mr. Incredible, I work alone shtick. No, get lost, huh? Someone might think it's the two of us to like 3 penny any hoods. DD, unbothered, quips at Spidey, asking the man if he never smiles. When Spidey replies that the man should be able to tell if he's smiling or not, DD shows the same paranoia we know Peter Parker does anytime he thinks someone's homing in on his secret identity, saying he could have x-ray vision and thinking,
If that doesn't throw him off the trail, nothing will.
Spidey ain't worried about your secret identity, DD. Take a breath, let it go. Meanwhile, the Masked Marauder and the Stiltman are politicking in a hidden cave headquarters, who knows where, and the Masked Marauder has this thing set up with the helicopter because no secret base is complete without one. And this helicopter's tricked out. It has a force field that disintegrates anything that gets too close, as we see when the Masked Marauder throws a heavy wooden box at it, turning it to ashes. The Marauder then tells Stiltman they need to team up to take out Daredevil and marvels at Stiltman's powers. And the Stiltman's powers, he's able to stretch the lengths of his legs to insane heights. That's it. That's all his power is. But the Masked Marauder is blown away, asking the man who's got 10% of Mr. Fantastic's powers how Daredevil ever managed to beat him in the first place. The world of the Marvel 60s was a strange and wondrously ridiculous place, to be sure. The Marauder is convinced someone at Nelson and Murdoch knows who DD is and figures there's one way to get the truth out of them. Capturing them all! Night falls on the city and the Stiltman stakes out the law offices, while inside, Matt lies about his twin brother Mike being Daredevil. Let me explain. Around this time, Matt thought the best way to throw his closest friends off the scent of him being Daredevil would be to create a twin brother who had eyesight and using his advanced senses would parade around without his glasses or walking stick as his quote-unquote twin brother Mike, convincing his closest friends that Mike was Daredevil. Because in the modern era, Mike was actually a living, breathing person thanks to psychic powers going awry. But that's a story for a different podcast, not this one. The Stiltman throws a gas pellet into the room, and because of his heightened senses, Matt is first to fall unconscious. His co-workers are out in seconds shortly thereafter, and Stiltman loads all their unconscious bodies into a basket dangling beneath the Masked Marauder's souped-up helicopter, and the cohorts fly off, leaving a ransom note for Daredevil on a desk inside the offices of Nelson and Murdoch. When the captives come to, Matt immediately starts squealing like a stuck Irish pig, telling the villains that his twin brother is Daredevil, marking himself as a coward in Karen's eyes, but buying them all some time. Marauder orders Stiltman to head down to ground level and begin his search for Mike Murdoch. Stiltman does, by heading to the nearest phone book and looking up Mike inside. Having no success, he decides to rob a jewelry store to get DD to come to him. But you know comic and cosmic timing had to kick in eventually, because the King of Swing from Forest Hills, Queens was on a nighttime crawl and spots Stiltman heading into the store, deciding as we knew he would to put the villain down. Spider-Man crashes in through a window, Stiltman retreats outside, stretches his legs to their max height, and before he even gets his taunt out of his mouth, is pummeled viciously by Spidey in two gorgeous panels. Gene Colan draws a beautiful Spidey for the record, and gorgeous dynamic action shots. Meanwhile, back in the Whirly Bird, the Masked Marauder, brandishing a Ruger, tells Matt he's going to have the blind man take a short walk off a long pier. The two quibble back and forth as Marauder leads Blind Justice towards the hatch of the copter at gunpoint. He is going to throw Matt out of this copter, but if you recall, there's a force field that will disintegrate Matt around it. Matt, knowing he'll have to time his moves perfectly, rams his head into the villain's stomach, forcing the man back into the force field button while letting off a shot from his Ruger at the same time. A shot Matt places his hands in front of. The bullet rips through the bindings holding Matt's hands, and Matt hurls himself backwards through the chopper doors, his tie whipping out above him. Karen shouts, "You murderer! You killed him!" But you know that ain't the case. Matt's hooked the leg on the landing gear of the chopper, and quickest change in the game, Murdoch is Daredevil in less than 2 panels. While in the chopper, Karen's proving she's got big brass ovaries. She rushes the Masked Marauder, clawing at the man with her perfectly manicured fingers a moment before DD flips into the chopper, kicking the villain across the face with both feet, and proceeds to beat the man ruthlessly in the small space of the cabin. Their brawl has them smash into the control stick. The copter flips upside down. Everyone goes tumbling, and in the madness, Daredevil tells the Marauder he knows who the man is, a one Frank Farnham, the landlord of the building Nelson and Murdoch is housed in. Further proof that most landlords ain't shit. Okay. Farnham reactivates the force field, hoping to get rid of all these people who suddenly know his secret identity by trapping them in the hold where he can finish them off with his Ruger. Daredevil, moving almost as fast as the guest star of this one, disarms Farnham, who shouts that he's got another gun, so this doesn't matter, but misreads the amount of space he has and tumbles out of the chopper, headfirst towards the force field, where he's seemingly killed by its disintegrating effects. Meanwhile, Stiltman manages to escape the raw crawler using a gas pellet and books it towards the George Washington Bridge, probably hoping to escape into Jersey, because who wants to head to Jersey in pursuit? Of course he spots the chopper the Masked Marauder has his plot from, being piloted expertly by Foggy Nelson. Add that to his resume. Foggy Nelson, staying ready so he doesn't have to get ready. My Nana would be proud. Stiltman, his feet inside the Hudson River, pulls a ray gun from who knows where and pulls the trigger. But the gun, electric powered, short circuits the idiot's electrically driven legs, causing him to shrink into the river, where Daredevil assures us he'll be picked up by the police. And that's the issue. Great art, awesome action, Spidey taking L's, and Karen proving you don't need superpowers to stand up for what's right. Just heart. Check this issue out if you can. A great Silver Age story. As the story closes over the GWB, just know it's not the last time you'll see the famous bridge or the tidal estuary beneath it in this one.
The credits.
And awesome aggregation of airborne thrills by Smilin' Stan Lee. Jazzy John Romita, that's the senior on art. And learnedly lettered by Whammy Sammy Still Goes Hammy Rosen.
The cover.
We've got the Amazing Spider-Man in Spidey costume red and blue above the spider's webs, as usual. Beneath this, we've got one of my favorite styles of Spidey cover, the King of Swing, high above the city we know and love. In a gorgeous display of one-point perspective, gray color skyscrapers leading into the horizon, snow has fallen on the Big Apple, cars and buses drive towards and away the horizon, on the street below, and New Yorkers hustle and bustle on the slippery sidewalks towards destinations unknown. As mentioned, we're high above it all, witnessing our hero suited and booted in classic red and blue on the sheer wall of the closest stage-right skyscraper, his left hand and both feet pressed against the building, his right arm moving across his body, partly blocking where his mouth would be if he weren't wearing a mask. There are surprise lines above his head as he stares with furrowed, buggy eyes at the villain of this issue, a one green leotarded, feather-necked, pale-skinned, bald-headed, scavenger-winged villain who's flying above and bearing down on our hero. A goldenrod caption box over Spidey's right shoulder lets us know what's what.
The Vulture's back, and Spidey's got him.
Ladies and gents, the Vulture, not seen since the Amazing Spider-Man Annual #1,
The Sinister Six.
That's
Ain't no punchlines to Fist Flying 2.
here on Me and My Friend Pete, has finally made his return to ASM. And when we've got the king of whirly-birds himself gracing these pages, you gotta know it's happening in dramatic fashion. Let's get into it. Page 1 opens to The Amazing Spider-Man in a goldenrod yellow banner above the title of this issue.
The Wings of the Vulture.
Beneath this, we see the King of Swing himself, crouched in midair, gripping a line of webbing with his left hand. He's just leapt from a wall where a pouch made of webbing is stuck, containing the clothing of his alter ego. Snow falls in thick globules all around him and blankets the city in the background, so we know we're in the midst of a blizzard. Why is Spidey out and about instead of warming up next to the fireplace sipping cocoa with maybe Flame Mary Jane right now? Simple.
If Kraven the Hunter is still in the city, I've got to keep searching till I find him. Can't let that tin-horn Tarzan go through life thinking he's beating me. Even the starry-eyed Spider-Man has his pride.
If you didn't read all about it last ish, we're beginning to lose patience with you. Stern Stan.
Our hero goes on to say that being out in such skimpy duds is liable to give him a cold, despite being good for his superhero image. I've had a couple of people ask why Spidey dresses in tights, but the answer is simple. Spidey and other heroes with high agility wear tights so they're less restricted when moving. Spidey, with his agility on best ever, probably finds it a lot easier to be a bouncing off the walls hero when he doesn't have to worry about parts of his costume getting snagged or whipping out around him in unnecessary flair. Think I'm kidding? Imagine every gymnast you've ever seen. This aside, because of the snowstorm, the web-slinger says his Spidey sense is muffled, making it even harder to track Kraven. That if he doesn't find the villain soon, he'll be the only hero in the city in a muffler and mittens.
But I can't quit now. I've got a feeling that the deadliest fight of my life will soon be coming up.
We turn the page. And on to, we get some dynamic shots of Spidey web swinging and leaping above the city as fast as he can, shouting that it's the only way to beat the cold. He winds up at the municipal prison, but stops himself from swinging over the building, noting there are more than a few people inside who'd love to get their hands on him because he's probably the best talent scout the place has ever had. Swinging low beneath a guard post, he decides to retire for the night, saying Kraven will have to wait. He's going home to hit the sack.
But as Spidey swings away, little does he dream.
The final panel of the page opens inside of the prison's hospital room, where two doctors in lab coats stand with the prison warden around a bed, where a man whose face is hidden behind a purple curtain lays beneath green sheets. One doctor tells the warden the man is dying and sinking fast. The warden says the man knows it, that he keeps making a final request to see his cellmate. The second doctor tells the warden to allow it, that at this stage in a man's life, granting the request won't do any harm. A moment before the man behind the curtain mutters out a sentence.
Blackie, I want to see Blackie.
A doctor says they'll get his cellmate and tells the man to save his strength. On 3, we see who the man is. A1 Lincoln O Vulcha, as he lays with his bald head pressed against his pillow, his eyebrows thick enough to fill the page, his weak smile lacking an upper lip, his thoughts race.
I'll save it all right. I won't cash in until I make sure that Blackie will finish the job I started. My sentence would have been up in another month. That's why I never tried to escape. I was a fool. But it's not too late. Blackie can carry on where the Vulture left off.
Minutes later, a scowling Khan reaches the quiet room under heavy guard.
We see a tall white man, maybe 6 feet, maybe mid-30s, muscular arms, high cheekbones, saggy jowls, long pointed nose, eyebrows thick enough to rival the Vulture's, and curly jet black hair, escorted into the room by a prison guard named Charlie, who orders him to hurry up and not to try any funny business. This is the Blackie the Vulture's been thinking about, his cellmate, As they approach, one of the doctors tells the man it's a miracle Lincoln O has hung on this long after the accident in the workshop and allows Blackie into the ward. Alone with Lincoln O in the next panel, Blackie gets right to business.
All right, Vulture, this is your last chance. You gonna tell me what I want to know, or let it just die with ya?
Lincoln says Blackie's finally won. The man should lean in closer because he doesn't want to be overheard before catching us up on their relationship.
You've hounded me for months. Tell you where I buried my last pair of vulture wings. I swore you'd never get it out of me. But now, I must tell you. For only he who wears the vulture's wings will possess the power to destroy Spider-Man. And Spider-Man must be destroyed. He must. He must.
Blackie, pressed for time, tells the old timer to stop making speeches, that as soon as he gets the wings, he'll polish the web head off easy and anyone else who brings static to him.
So talk, blame ya. Where did you bury him? Hurry, while you can still see it.
Vulture does.
The wings, together with a magnetic pack, 500 yards from North Gun Tower, near Broken Pines. I did it months ago, so I'd have an extra pair in case police jailed me.
Blackie's heard all he wanted to. Triumphant, he throws caution to the wind, forgetting there are 4 men just outside. His fist clenched, eyes closed, head back towards the ceiling. He raves.
It worked. I got what I want at last. Nothing can stop Blackie Drago now. It worked. What worked? What do you mean? That was no accident, you old fool. I arranged it to get you to talk, but no one will ever know that, except in you and me.
This man set the Vulture up to be mortally injured. No honor amongst thieves, to be sure. 4 opens to Blackie Drago exiting the hospital ward, all smiles. When Charlie asks what the guy's making all the racket for, Drago shouts the CO doesn't know the half, looking over his shoulder at the irate Lincoln O, wishing the man a fond so long, adding that if there are any final favors he can do for the man, Vulture should let him know now. The Vulture, of course, is pissed.
You rotten double-crosser. Two-time snake. You won't get away. You can't. You can't. Getting dizzy. Everything's spinning around. Getting dark. Hazy.
Still at death's door, he has to settle himself down as the room starts to spin.
They say a dying man often sees his entire life pass before him in his few remaining seconds. If so, then Spider-Man must be considered the most important part of the Vulture's life, for as his quivering eyelids close, perhaps for the last time, he seems to see.
We get Vulture resting his head on his pillow, his eyes rolling back as we get what may be his final flashback.
Could have beaten him.
In this flashback's puffy clouds, we see the Vulture putting in work, catching our hero with a feathered right cross in one image, snapping Spidey's head back, and in the other, kicking our hero in the ribs with her left foot, leaving Spidey sprawled. His greatest hits, I'm sure, but apparently it's Drago's time to step into the role of wing scavenger, and I imagine he's thinking much like his cousin Ivan over in the USSR. Translation?
I must break you.
Spidey is in for some chop. For the record, this is the last time we see Lincoln O Vulcha in this issue.
A short time later, Blackie Drago takes the most desperate gamble of his entire sordid career.
5 opens to Blackie Drago in the prison yard, his back pressed against the corner of the prison as a purple station wagon pulls out of the prison garage, stage right. And before you wonder how Drago is even allowed to be outside at a moment like this, his thoughts give us the answer.
It took me years to get me a trustee, to be allowed to move around inside the gates like this. If I fail now, I lose everything. My privileges, my chance for parole, everything. But still, I gotta do it.
So I used to know a guy who almost exclusively referred to himself in the third person as
The Sergio.
I worked with him back in my days as a chef. In the words of the Sergio liked to drink, the Sergio liked to smoke, the Sergio liked to splash. What he left out in his soliloquy of his love of vices, the Sergio liked to gamble, believing in a very simple rule.
Scared money don't make no money.
Translation? Who dares wins, and Blackie Drago seems to be cut from the same cloth. This in mind, he makes his move, rushing forward in the gutter between panels, catching the guard exiting the car unaware, clubbing the man in the back of the head. He hops into the car and guns it through the open prison entrance, towards the Vulture's secret stash, caution clearly tossed to the wind. On his knees in the snow, the assaulted CO crawls to a call box, shouting that he'd know that cold, raspy voice anywhere. Drago must be a fool to pull a stunt like this. He makes a jailbreak call and the whole prison jumps into high alert in the final panel. There are sirens blaring. I imagine guards inside grabbing rifles, rushing towards exits and lookout posts, but Drago is already pushing the pedal through the floor of the purple Oldsmobile, taunting the prison guards as he does.
Go on. Who? Get your money's worth out of that crummy siren. For all the good it'll do ya, all I gotta do is go 500 yards from the North Gun Tower. Nothing can catch up to me before I grab the Vulture's wings. And once I do, the whole blame world will be mine, just for the taking.
This makes me wonder what the Vulture's plan was before the assassination attempt. Was he going to run 5 football fields to the wings? Did he have a plan to break into prison? I guess at this point it really doesn't matter. 6 opens to the abandoned Oldsmobile and a gang of police officers, guns drawn, trudging towards the vehicle, and you know Joe and Tomas are on scene. Tomas shouting that the man couldn't have gotten far on foot. Joe, rifle in hand, shouting,
"It'll be a sense to track him in the snow. He must have been stir crazy to try a break on a day like this."
"Right, there's footprints everywhere. What a fool. What a fool he must be."
But just a short distance ahead, Blackie Drago smirks with sinister, savage satisfaction.
Alliteration going crazy. Drago holds up the Vulture's costume, shouting the plastic bag the villain hid it in kept the outfit preserved. He says all he's got to do is slide into it and take off. And you know changing into a costume only takes about 30 seconds in comics, so Blackie suited and booted in no time in the next panel, giving us another life maxim.
No time to practice. I gotta get airborne. Fast.
Translation? Learned by doing. He's spotted by 2 blonde police officers. One shouts the tracks in the snow and where they are. The other says he thought he heard the rustle of wings. A moment before we see Blackie Drago airborne, his entire body wobbling as he tries to get used to life in the sky. The cop who heard the rustling shouts,
"Look, up there, it's him."
The second,
"Stop him. He must have found the Vulture's wings."
and they start letting shots go in 616 cop fashion, firing rounds at the winged imposter who in his panic and inexperience plummets towards the ground, shouting that he can't get the hang of it. But if we've learned anything about Blackie Drago in his short time in this issue already, we've learned the guy's got big brass ones and a never say quit attitude. In the final panel, Joe's finally arrived on scene. He takes a knee and lets a bullet fly from his rifle. The bullet bounces off a stone pillar beside Blackie as he pulls up sharply, shouting,
All the things the Vulture used to say about air currents, downdrafts, wind velocity is coming back to me. I'm getting it.
A villain teaching us the importance of listening to our elders. Joe shouts, the man soaring out of range. Blackie, high above the police officers now to open page 7, shouts,
I got the feel of it. Just in time. I'm flying. I'm safe. Nothing can touch me now.
My people, Blackie O Vulcha is on the scene.
But even as the new Vulture soars out of sight, it behooves us to observe another event which occurs next morning.
In the next panel, we find Pete and Harry, college classmates, roommates, and right now driving buddies, pulling away from the curb outside of their apartment as a man in snow gear shovels his car out of the snow, probably pissed at Harry because you know the kid paid someone to do it for him. Harry is not shoveling his own snow. Inside of Harry's blue box Chevy, probably a new car, you know the kid got money. Pete tells his friend it's a good thing they got an early start, that the snowstorm left half the city blanketed. Harry, hearing the nasal tone Pete's speaking with, says the guy sounds like an ad for headache pills. Pete says he's fine, that he may just be coming down with a cold or something. Harry, a genuine look of concern on his face in the next panel, stares at Pete as the kid runs his hands through his hair and says,
Coming down with? Son, you look as though every virus in town is having a convention right in your noggin.
Pete says he feels that way, thinking,
Wonder how I'd look swinging around town in my Spidey suit, armed with aspirins and a bottle of nose jumps.
But more important to note, Pete is not the guy who can superhero when he has a cold. The last time the kid tried to take on one of his big bads while he was under the weather, he was thoroughly trounced, almost killed, and humiliated down in Coney Island. The insult to the injury, the one-man hands team Dr. Octopus unmasked him in front of the miserable magnate J. Jonah Jameson and his lady love at the time, Betty Brant. That was season 1 episode,
Unmasked by Dr. Octopus.
or
You again?
here on Me and My Friend Pete. Long story short, if Spidey's got a cold, the last thing he should be doing is engaging in fisticuffs. But maybe he won't have to.
Right.
Shut it, you! Back to Back in the car, Harry says the kid looks like he could infect the entire city just breathing out a few times. Pete agrees.
Then, a few minutes later, at good old ESU,
Pete and Harry enter the main campus building of Empire State University and spot the heartthrob Gwen Stacy. She's wearing a red turtleneck and has her blonde hair parted on the right side of her head, accentuating her high cheekbones, catching Pete's attention easily.
Hi, Gwen. Say, you sure look great wearing your hair that way.
Gwen, smiling, replies that it was just something casual she threw together that took all morning, of course.
oh boy, just my luck. Gwen's in a mellow mood, and I feel like an accident looking for a place to happen.
Harry, shade on 11, jumps in with his appraisal of Gwen's new look.
Say, no wonder Pete likes your hairdo, Gwen. It's more like the way Mary Jane's been wearing hers.
Pete, with a side eye that could sew Harry in half, thinks,
Harry, why must you have such a big flapping mouth?
but he's gotta know all's fair in love and war, and if it ain't been made blatantly apparent, Harry's got a thing for Gwen as well. At this point, though, who doesn't? Gwen, a sheepish expression on her face, says Harry's right, that she hadn't thought of that. But something tells me she did.
But, as the morning progresses, Pete finds it increasingly difficult to concentrate on his subjects, let alone Gwen Stacy's hairstyle.
In the final panel, Pete, his right elbow pressed on the desk, the hand holding his head up, has a book cracked open in front of him, and Erlenmeyer flashed behind it and is struggling to keep it together. A fact not ignored by his professor, who walks over to him concerned as Gwen watches from a couple feet away.
Parker, your face is flushed and you look feverish to me. I suggest you go home and get yourself some rest.
And who's Pete to argue?
I guess you're right, Mr. Warren. I do feel kind of woozy.
We turn the page and we're on
The Infinity Page.
Page 8. Just in time to witness Pete at home stretched out on his couch watching black and white television, or just television if we're playing by 60s rules, the caption box painting the scene.
And so, later that day, our somewhat sickly superhero takes his ease in front of humanity's all-purpose pacifier as he hears.
Before bringing this news program to a close, we present an editorial by our sponsor, the eminent publisher of the Daily Bugle, Mr. J. Jonah Jameson.
Gee, as if I wasn't sick enough. Well, I might as well hear what old Chuckles has to say.
The camera shifts and we get a shot of J. Jonah Jameson, smug sneer on his face, as usual, jerking his thumb at a picture of Spider-Man behind him, gearing up to tirade.
Once again, events of the past week have proven that Spider-Man is a dangerous, deadly menace to our fair city.
I might have known it. The same old tire wheeze all over again.
For proof of the harm which that web-crawling public enemy can cause, consider the case of Craven the Hunter.
Huh? I thought well saved the life of Harry's father.
This happened last issue/episode, of course. That's
In the hands of the hunter.
or
Tits up.
here on Me and My Friend Pete. A menacing image of Craven the Hunter fills the television screen in the next panel. JJJ continues.
If Spider-Man had not interfered, the police would have captured Craven by now. Instead, another dangerous killer now roams our streets thanks to that scurrilous, sinister superhero.
Jonah hands the broadcast back to the news anchor as Pete forces himself up from the couch to change the channel, but pauses a moment later as the newscaster proves that a blizzard's almost like rain. It pours.
Thank you, Mr. Jameson, for another candid commentary in your famous, fearless, outspoken manner. And now, further news of last night's jailbreak at Municipal Prison. Moments after Blackie Drago made good his escape, a man wearing the Vulture's wings was seen flying above the area. If you see this man, you are urged to call our special police number.
Pete, having heard enough, plops down onto his couch and, head down, runs his hands through his hair, falling right into a melancholy monologue.
It's not enough that Craven is still at large. Now there's a new Vulture making the scene, and he's probably a lot younger and stronger than the old one. And naturally, it all has to happen when I feel like a refugee from an oxygen tent. Oh, my aching head. Wonder if I should call the doctor.
But, lest we get too medicinal about the whole thing, let's switch our scene once again.
Where we find Blackie Drago still suited, still booted, hunched over a table where a couple of different screwdrivers and wires sit, working on what appears to be large green orchid petals at the center of the table. From him we learn that this is a new helmet with dual functionality, protection, and the ability to strike fear into his enemies, which, of course, is a really big plus in his future line of work. Then, making me wonder exactly what the man's been locked up for, he adds that he can probably fit a shortwave receiver into the helmet as well. What can't this man do?
Play things straight and narrow.
Touche, touche.
Then, a short time later,
Nine opens to the new king of the sky, shoving his helmet onto his head, shouting he's as ready as he'll ever be. The only thing he needs now is practice. And the guy wastes no time. He takes to the skies in the gutter between panels, coming out of a loop-de-loop in the next. If you know anything about our hero, you know the king of swing can't handle a guy who can loop the loops. 2 times he's been knocked out by the Vulture so far. Both times it was right after the man performed the acrobatic aerial maneuver. Either way, the Vulture 2.0 shouts flying gets easier every time he does it. That Lincoln O was a genius because the wings are magic. But Lincoln O is also a fool because he, Blacky Drago, isn't going to waste any time getting revenge on Spider-Man. He's got his own plans and none of them include superheroes. Unless any of them are dumb enough to mess with him, of course. Of course. Forget about the fact he promised Vulture he'd get revenge. No honor amongst, remember?
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
Vulture 2.0 proves himself an aerial natural, swooping wide in the gutter between panels before demolishing a chimney stack with both feet in the next, nearly breaking his arm, patting himself on the back.
It's getting so that I can do whatever I want to without even thinking about it.
In the final panel, he soars high above the city and unsuspecting soon-to-be prey, shouting the city is right to be looted and the world better look out because here comes the Vulture.
Thus, the startled city, which had thought itself free from the scourge of the Vulture, suddenly learns that one of the most dangerous of all costume menaces flies again.
10 opens to a lady in red staring at the sky in shock, dropping the parcel she was carrying as an armored guard stares up, his right hand reaching for the holster on his hip, his left gripping a burgundy bag. The guard's casting a large shadow of the new Vulture, who shouts the payroll bag in the armored guard's hands is just what he needs. Vulture swoops down, snatches the bag from the man, and is back in the sky before the guard can even get his gun drawn. And this is only the beginning.
Hour after hour, the Vulture strikes like a flying wraith. No person is safe, no target inviolate.
We see a white guy with a pencil-thin mustache, the Carl Winslow working, a SJB bow tie, and purple pinstripe suit, gripping a receiver in front of a broken window. We know we're high above the ground because the Vulture's flying away towards the New York skyline. And the guy is shouting into the receiver of the phone gripped in his hand.
Give me the police. I've been robbed by the Vulture. He didn't try to hide. Didn't worry about the burglar alarm. He knows that no one can stop him.
We get a great panel next of the Vulture perched on a ledge, bent low, his back to us, resembling very much the carrion bird he's taken the name of. Behind him we see the payroll bag and loose bills on the ledge atop the snow because who needs to protect their ill-gotten gains when the gains gotten ill won't stop? And he knows it!
The city and all its wealth are mine. Everything I desire is mine, just for the taking. Even Spider-Man hasn't dared to show himself. He knows I'm his master.
He said he's shown enough. That explains his voice. Okay, sometimes when I'm like choosing the voices for these characters, I'm not the best. Like I'm doing this, I'm having fun, but I do try really hard to make like one voice for a character. If I choose one voice for a character, I want it to be like uniform throughout. Anytime you hear that character, it's going to be the voice. Whether you think it's good or bad, I'm trying, right? So when I read this line, right?
He knows I'm his master.
Immediately, if you're a black American and you hear somebody say they the master, you know, show enough is the only thing that comes to mind.
Am I the meanest? Show enough. Am I the prettiest? Show enough. Am I the baddest mofo low down around this town? Show enough. I can't hear you. Show enough.
So I had to go watch The Last Dragon so I could kind of like hear the voice, practice the voice, get the voice back down. And The Last Dragon has got to be the most asinine, insane kung fu movie I have ever seen. There's a point where Show Nuff goes to the movie theater while Bruce Leroy is watching a movie and tries to get Bruce Leroy to fight him. Please, go to YouTube, watch Show Nuff in the movie theater. That's all you gotta do. And if you want to see how over the top things can get in a black kung fu movie, The Last Dragon. Back to.
And speaking of our youthful wall crawler,
We find Spider-Pete getting suited and booted, quite literally putting his uniform boots on. Dizzy stars bouncing around his head in his apartment, and the kids heard enough.
I've had just about all I could take. The only thing to listen to on the radio is bulletins, one after the other, about the Vulture. That high-flying hood is running wild, and he's gotta be stopped.
But have you ever been so sick you're lightheaded whenever you try to stand up straight? That's what Pete's experiencing right now. Fully suited minus the mask, he stands up to put it on and stumbles into the wall beside him, gripping his head, the world around him spinning.
Oh, my head. I must be even weaker than I thought. Parker, you better hit the sack again. Fast.
In the final panel, the camera pulled in tight on his face. He reaches for the phone, anguish all over his face, proving one of my life maxims true. Namely, it is not weak to ask for help when you need it. In fact, it's a sign of strength. And with that strength, he's going to call the only other hero he can trust.
I hate to do this, but maybe if I can hold Matt Murdock, he'll put Daredevil on his trail. It's the least he can do after me fighting Stiltman for him.
And to be fair, I like that Pete said fighting Stiltman, not beating the Stiltman. I don't want to say Pete took a loss to Stiltman, but the way that I view wins and losses in comic books is really simple. If you're a villain, it's not about beating the hero unless you're specifically going into things as if it's a grudge match, right? Dr. Octopus going after Spider-Man, calling Spider-Man out in Coney Island, that's a grudge match. So then his win would be knocking Spider-Man out. In the case of the Stiltman in that issue, Stiltman went to that jewelry store to lure DD out. If Spider-Man comes up onto the scene, his goal is not to beat Spider-Man unconscious. That was never his plan. He wanted Daredevil. And because he didn't get Daredevil, his goal then is to escape. So if a villain escapes, I count that as a win. So, all that being said, Pete is right to say that he fought Stiltman for Daredevil, but he didn't beat Stiltman. The Stiltman won that one because the Stiltman escaped. Back to, you know and I know if Pete's got one problem though, it's not knowing when he's in over his head. 11 opens to him finding the strength to stand, slamming the receiver down on the phone, a determined gleam in his squinting eyes, stars still dancing around his head, he monologues something fierce.
No, I get chicken out at a time like this. I fought the Vulture before. I know his style. Even if this is a new Joker wearing those crummy wings, it's still Spider-Man's job. Whatever else I may be, I'm no quitter.
Resolve setting in, he pulls the mask down on his face, shouting that a little web swinging may actually be just what the doctor orders, and leaps through his open window, still rationalizing his bad decision, now saying that if he skips out when he has a cold, what's to stop him from doing the same when he has dandruff, or chapped lips, or worse, acne? High above the city now, he lets us and no one know that the new Vulture isn't even bothering to cover his tracks, so the villain shouldn't be too difficult to find, and that he, Spider-Man, has to keep moving or risk freezing to death. But would anyone have revoked his hero card if he decided to put on an extra layer of clothing, some thermals beneath his suit? Spidey, I hate to say it, but it seems like, right now, you're hustling backwards.
And as our soliloquizing stalwart makes the rooftop scene,
the Vulture has swooped low and given chase to a man gripping a mahogany briefcase, running for dear life. This guy's wearing purple slacks, sky blue dress socks, and an olive trench coat. With colors clashing like this, are you surprised the Vulture spotted him? Either way, apparently there are negotiable bonds inside the briefcase, and the Vulture wants them. Negotiable bonds? Translation? According to uslegal.com, negotiable bonds are bonds issued by private corporation or bonds issued by the U.S., the states, municipalities, and other political subdivisions which are payable to order or bearer. Such bonds are payable to order or bearer whether the interest coupons are attached or detached. But, according to Investopedia.com, a benefit of pay-to-order checks is that they help protect the payer from an unauthorized individual or organization attempting to fraudulently withdraw money from the payer's bank account. Translation of the translation? There is no legal way Blackie Drago can cash these bonds. The man's escaped from prison, and you gotta know there's an APB out for him. He cannot walk into any bank. He can't even take off the costume, walk into the bank and be like,
hey, name's Blackie Drago. If you haven't heard, I's the master. And I'd like to cast this pay-to-order check.
He can't do that. Nothing he's doing makes sense. He ain't even hustling backwards. He's just backwards. That won't stop him though. On 12, he grabs the briefcase, but we see businessmen have finally gotten smart. When vultures are in the sky, they have to handcuff the briefcases to their wrist. And this clashingly clad businessman has finally gotten it. He's handcuffed the briefcase to his wrist. When the Vulture says he's going to get the briefcase one way or another, the terrified yet defiant man replies,
it's impossible. You can't break the chain. Help! Police!
Joe and Tomas pull up onto the scene in their squad car, but have to helplessly watch as the Vulture grabs the man by his trench coat collar and with a beat of his mighty anti-gravity wings, takes off from the ground towards the New York skies.
Seconds later, atop a sky-high tower of the George Washington Bridge,
the Vulture's taking this guy to the top of the GW and drops him there. And this is beautiful art. This perspective is 1 point aiming down. John Romita is working right now. While the man cowers, the Vulture raises both arms above his head, puffs his chest out, and bears down on the man doing his best impersonation of a sharp-tailed grouse, shouting he'll find a way to get that briefcase and nobody is going to be able to save this guy in time. Vulture finna chew this man's arm off.
But, like so many disillusioned desperados before him, the Vulture has reckoned without our sneezing, sniffling, shivering Spider-Man.
In the final panel, we find Spidey gripping a sheer wall high above the city as police cars race towards the Hudson beneath him. Realizing this is probably his best bet to find the Vulture, he follows. 13 opens to a gorgeous panel of Spidey stage left, gripping a strand of webbing, spots dancing in front of his eyes, about to leap from the sheer wall his feet are clinging to as he stares towards stage right at the George Washington Bridge in the distance.
There's what they're all heading for. Two figures at the very top of the nearest tower. And it looks like I'm the only one who can reach them in time.
In the gutter between panels, he makes his way towards the bridge, and in the next, scales the side of the southern tower, thinking to himself,
Just my luck. He has to be perched up here in the coldest spot in town. Now, if I can plow into him before he takes to the air, sounds like I'm not a second too soon.
While at the top of the tower, the Vulture lets the guy he's kidnapped know how he's going to get the contents of the case.
Since I can't break the chain or open the lock bag up here, we'll see if a steep fall won't cause the case to shatter and spill its contents.
To be fair, not a bad plan. And when the man shouts that he's attached to the case, the Vulture essentially replies, sucks to suck. But luckily for the poorly dressed captive, Spidey's just reached the lip of the tower. Wasting no time, he bounces over the side, both fists in front of him, his body completely horizontal towards the Vulture. But the snows made the side of the tower slippery. So instead of the knockout punch our hero was going for, he clubs the Vulture on the right pectoral, shouting,
Excuse the fist, friend. I just wanted you to stop flapping those wings. It's cold enough up here now.
And we got action.
The force is enough to knock the villain off balance, sending him spiraling down towards the Hudson River to open 14, as Spidey thinks this is just what he wanted. With no time to waste, Spidey grabs the hostage by the collar in the gutter between panels, and gripping the end of a web line in the next, lowers the man down to earth where Joe and Tomas are waiting outside of their squad car. When the man asks what he can do to repay our hero, Spidey replies,
Well, you could lend me a Kleenex.
Before leaping over the side of the bridge and gripping the sheer wall, hunched over, his thoughts racing as a tugboat passes beneath him.
Funny, I didn't hear him splash. And that means my job isn't finished yet, no matter how blank I feel. Uh-oh, I'm beginning to tingle. Heads up, Parker.
The Vulture rockets past, but Spidey's ready. He straightens his back, lets Drago shoot past, and raising his right hand, sprays a line of webbing that wraps around the man's legs. Drago, pissed, starts talking his smack.
You a fool to butt in, Spider-Man. Now I'll finish where the original Vulture left off.
Spidey pulls from the bridge and into the open air of the final panel, makes sure Drago knows the score.
Suit yourself, chum. But as I remember it, he left off with me pulverizing him.
But noting in his thoughts, the man has yanked him from the wall effortlessly, and the Vulture's just getting started. 15 opens to the Vulture, Spidey in tow, soaring towards the girder of the GWB before veering away at the last second. His goal? To whiplash Spidey against the bridge. Spidey might have agility on best ever, but there's little he can do in a moment like this except brace himself. He thinks,
I've got to twist around in midair. Must strike the flexible cables instead of the steel girder.
And smashes into a suspension cable with a rubbery spang. In the final panel, Spidey, his whole body shaking from the reverberations, his left arm wrapped around a suspension cable, his right pressed against the girder, grips his head, spots dancing in front of his eyes in a bad way.
I did it, but can't snap out of it as fast as usual. Head's throbbing, aching more than ever, and the Vulture's hovering, circling around like a real flying scavenger.
And Drago's not done. He swoops towards our wounded hero from stage left, shouting threats. But the beauty in this panel comes from the tugboat just chugging along in the Hudson in the space between Spidey's right arm and knee. This is great art by JRSR, showing that everything on this page has taken place in a very short amount of time. Big JR, and he is working right now. 16 opens to police officers on the bridge beneath our hero. Tomas gripping a megaphone, probably shouting at people to clear the bridge as Spider-Man fights an internal battle.
Can hardly hold on. Everything's getting hazy in my head. Pounding. I'll let him grab me. Anything to give me a few seconds to snap out of it. Everything's swimming round in front of my eyes. Can barely see. I'm falling.
And without a word, he tumbles from the suspension cable towards the river below.
But before the desperate youth can topple forward, the Vulture strikes.
And strike indeed! The Vulture swoops in and grabs the amazing Spider-Man as he falls around the neck with his thick thighs. The Vulture doesn't skip leg day. Blocky Drago squats. Translation? The thunder-thighed thief isn't his Birkin. But he's giving Spidey exactly what our hero wants.
Who says my luck is always bad? He doesn't realize what a great favor he's just done for me. If he hadn't grabbed me, I'd have passed out.
Revitalized by the wind whipping through the Vulture's thighs at his face, Spidey's got a second wind, but the Vulture's still too fast, too agile, his thighs too strong for our hero to get a battle-ending swing in, and Drago knows it.
Even you, with all your freakish spider powers, can't survive a fall from this height. But I won't let you drop yet. No, that would be too easy. I'm enjoying my victory too much. I'll fly you over the city for a while to let everyone see how helpless the amazing Spider-Man is against the wings of the Vulture. And
said the title.
At that very precise, exact self-same instant. Not that our split-second chronology is really all that important.
We find the always stylish Mary Jane in her signature Silver Age white leather coat, cowboy boots to match, a mod skirt with triangular arrow patterns of SJB blue, black, and purple pointing towards her stunning face, and the goldenrod scarf. Her red hair, banged, flawless. Behind her, we see Anna Watson in a green coat, SJB scarf wrapping her head, snow boots looking decidedly utility, her hand on Aunt May's shoulder. May's in a purple overcoat with black wool lining on the cuffs and collar and a matching winter hat. Why is May worried? She heard Pete went home early with the code, so she's convinced Mary Jane to bring her to her nephew's new bachelor pad so she can check on him. MJ leads the way, saying they're here and May shouldn't be worried. There isn't an oxygen tent in sight. She knocks and Harry, nose in the air, waves onto him. Osborn opens the door almost immediately. When MJ says they've come to see his germ-riddled roomie, Harry replies that Pete didn't come home, that he probably stopped in at the Silver Spoon, ESU's It Kid hangout, for a soda. This puts May's mind at ease immediately. She says she shouldn't worry so much, but what do people expect? Pete's always been a fragile boy. MJ, over this doting, shoots an idea at Harry.
Let's drive Mrs. P and my ever-loving aunt home in your chariot. Then we can join PDO for a Coke. Oak?
Of course, Harry doesn't pass up a shot to get some alone time with MJ and agrees.
As you probably guessed, we just tossed in that titanically tame tableau for the benefit of Jazzy Johnny, who'd rather draw slick chicks than flying fiends. But now, it's frenzy time again.
We're back in the sky above the edge of New York City, the Vulture still holding our hero by the throat between his thunderous thighs, still talking his smack.
Ha! So you stopped struggling, have you? I guess you'd soon be petrified with fear.
But you gotta know, the King of Swing is biding his time.
Fear schmear! I've gotta play possum till my head clears. That flagpole below, it might be my one chance.
When Vulture drags our hero towards said flagpole, Spidey lets the man continue his trash talk.
Are you wondering when I'll drop you? Well, in case you're interested, I'll...
Whitey moan.
Tell you what, Vulture, I'll end the suspense with a couple of karate chops.
And Spidey's done exactly that, whacking the flying fiend's thighs with two vicious judo chops. There are no chops in judo.
So, those have to do it. I'm too weak for another try.
On 18, pain lines radiating from the ultimate Charlie horse, Spidey's whipped onto Vulture's right thigh. Spidey falls from the man's leg lock, reaching out with both hands for the flagpole head first. He grabs it in the gutter between panels, and agility on. What's the birdie? Does a loop-de-loop of his own before releasing the rod. Both feet aimed at the Vulture, slamming them into the winged wacko's sternum before backflipping off impact and landing on a nearby rooftop. Spot still dancing in front of his eyes. Vulture 2.0 is proving to be made of hardier stuff than Lincoln O because he eats the blow unfazed, shouting he's still playing with our hero. He raises both fists, gearing up to make his move. Spidey thinking,
it's impossible. I'm finding my reflex alone. Can hardly keep my balance.
The Vulture shoots towards Spidey with a giant swoosh sound effect overhead, whacking Spidey with his right wing, sending our hero awkwardly airborne to close the page.
But, although on the very verge of unconsciousness, Spidey's amazing reflexes take over once more, as his nearly numb hands dart out towards the wall without conscious thought.
Crouched low, Spidey's managed to cling to the wall with the tips of his fingers and swing his legs onto the wall behind them to open 19. Facing south, it's one of the few panels I've ever seen in these early Silver Age comics where Spidey says or thinks nothing. The kid's struggling. And the Vulture? Well, the Vulture is verbose.
Still think you have a chance for survival, do you? You're putting up a good fight, mister, but I'm just not buying.
The camera gives us a full body shot of our hero crouched in the next panel.
What happened? Oh, I remember now. Was falling. Managed to reach out in time. But he's attacking again.
The kid was knocked out, running on pure instinct, taking a licking, and keeping on ticking. The Amazing Spider-Man, and he is hurting right now.
If I didn't have this fever, if my head wasn't burning so, I could take him. I know I could, but I just can't give up now. How can Spider-Man be beaten by uncommon cold? I never thought the end would come like this.
But come what may, things are not looking good for the King of Quip, because the Vulture's falling off to gather speed and is swooping in low now, screaming.
Stay where you are, Spider-Man. This will only take a second.
And Spidey, quite literally trembling, loses his grip on the wall for a second time.
He's shouting something, but can't hear, can't see. Everything going dark. Can't hang on. The world is spinning round.
20 opens to the Vulture doing an aerial sweep of Spidey's only leg clinging to the wall, shouting.
Ha! It was even easier than I expected.
Spider-Man tumbles, unconscious, towards the earth below. He crashes onto a snowy rooftop, his arms and legs splayed out beneath him and at his sides like a crime scene chalk outline as cars rumble east and west on the ground below, oblivious to New York's protector, unconscious, 6 stories above their heads. As the Vulture flies off, draw north, the first position you want to be in when the fight's over, and make no mistake, this fight is over. The villain soars off to parts unknown, talking his smack.
He's finished. If the fall didn't do it, the freezing cold will. While he lies there, Spider-Man has been destroyed at last by the high-flying Vulture. Show Nuff.
In the final panel of this issue, our
Panel of the Week.
Spider-Man lays slightly off center, arms wide, both legs slightly bent, his right foot tucked beneath his left thigh, his head facing stage left, palms up, surrounded by snow and the city below.
To be continued.
And we're out! So, Spidey, check me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we've ever seen our hero left unconscious in a snow bluff to close out an issue. And what an issue! Drago bursting on the scene as a double-crossing savant capable of learning anything in only a few tries was the highlight of Stan Lee's writing in this one. But the MVP goes to, as it often does, Mr. John Romita. That's the senior. The man was putting his artistic chops on full display. His rendering of the George Washington Bridge, stunning. His Vulture on his deathbed, emotion-inducing. His ridiculously underdressed Mary Jane, smoking. Respectfully. But what put him head and shoulders over in this one was Spidey and Vulture's fight scene. From the pacing to the dynamic angles to the backgrounds to the acrobatics, both aerial from the Vulture and best ever from our hero, Romita got to the point where he was quite literally just showing off. This comic was another one of those embarrassments of riches. I'm feeling wealthy just talking about it. That's the main episode this week! And that's true. That's the main episode, but there is more, me and my friend Pete, available for your listening pleasure right now. If you sign up to patreon.com/HSPP in the Keykeeper or High Council tiers, patrons have a vault filled with bonus episodes covering comic book stories from all over the multiverse of comic book universes. Next bonus episode, we're back in Marvel's House of Ideas covering Avengers, Volume 4, Number 3. Set in the heroic age of Marvel as the Avengers battle one of Marvel's deadliest villains, the Armageddon-bringing Apocalypse. And he hasn't come alone. He's brought his 4 horsemen with him, and you may have heard of them. Wolverine, Scarlet Witch, Iron Man, and Spider-Man. If you become a patron before ASM number 50, you'll receive a thank you gift from me and my friend Pete for being a supporter during Season 2. Let's keep these good times rolling. You won't regret it. And here, look, I don't even have to sell this one too hard. Amazing Spider-Man number 49, Vulture 2.0, and Kraven the Hunter go 2-on-1 with the Great One in a tale that can only be titled From the Depths of Defeat. Season 2's coming to an end, but who said it won't go out with a full-on explosion? Not I. You got questions? Send them to me in my friend Pete at gmail.com and I'll go digging for the answers. Follow us on Instagram at MNMFP_podcast. The panel of the week can be found at patreon.com/HSPP. Thank you so much to all our patrons. We couldn't do it without you, and we wouldn't want to if we could. Please like, please comment, please share, please take care.
Sign up to the
and
Patreon,
please
why don't
think of
you?
the world and be true to yourself. All that said, that's all that said. That dusty trails are calling, but there's no use stalling, cause you know the tagline for the people. A great power, baby. You gotta make sure you're being responsible. I'm out of here.